Welcome back. Today I'm going to analyze a game I played recently. I'm going to try to figure out the one move. The game review said there was one move that lost it for me, and it was very early in the game. But I'm also going to tell you the story of how we ended up with this position after 70-something moves. You'll notice that all the opponent's pieces are back on their original squares, which was quite fascinating to me. But anyway, let's switch over to the game board. I did open with e4, which I have been doing recently. My opponent played the Sicilian. At first I was going ahead and, because I had started playing the Vienna, so I was playing knight to c3 no matter what my opponent played. Because it'll work against the Caro-Kann, it works against e5. It doesn't really work against the Scandinavian. So if they were playing the Scandinavian, I was taking, but everything else I was playing knight to c3. But recently I switched here and playing knight to f3, again against anything but the Scandinavian. So I played that, which is apparently fine. My opponent played knight to c6, as often happens in the Scandinavian. And I've heard, I don't remember where, that c3 is a good move against the Sicilian defense in this position because you can then play d4 protected by this pawn. So that's what I played. We're on move 3. My opponent played d5, which is their best move. I did not know here that I was supposed to take it. Apparently Stockfish says taking it is the best move. As you know, I haven't played e4 that long, so I'm not familiar with all these variations in the openings, especially ones that aren't played as often at my level, like the Sicilian defense. Okay, so I was supposed to have taken it or played d3 to defend this. Okay, well, that makes sense. I went ahead and played d4, which apparently it says it's good, but it looks like it was an inaccuracy, and now they're supposed to take here, which is fine. That pawn's not defended, and also that would be threatening my knight, so that makes sense. That is what my opponent played. Okay, my opponent has a slight edge here. I need to play knight to e5 or d5, threatening their knight. Okay, I get both of those, and I also see why I probably should have taken that pawn on the previous turn and just let their queen take back. And then they would have been without a d-pawn, and I would have been without the e-pawn, I guess. Okay, but here, I guess I see that. It says that they would take this pawn, and I would play my bishop out here. I don't know if I would or not. I think if they took this pawn, I don't know. I need to become more familiar with these. But what I did instead was I took that pawn, and that is the blunder that lost me the game. Apparently, or I should say, he put me in a losing position for the rest of the game. It says it's only -2.5 here. The game review said -4.5. And their best move is to take my queen, which is what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to take my queen, and that would lose my right to castle, right? But instead they took my knight, which was their second best move. And I'm supposed to take here, but I would still be behind. But instead I took their queen, which they can take back. Oh, and I'm supposed to take that. Well, okay. Here apparently, no, it's changed its mind. Stockfish says what I played is my best move. Okay, but I'm still down -2. And apparently I was down at least -2 the rest of the game, according to the graph on the game review. But now let me tell you the story about how we ended up in the position that you saw at the end. I thought I played pretty well, but here after just a few more moves, I'm down -3. And then, well, still -3 apparently. So I must have been playing fairly well up to a certain point. My opponent plays an inaccuracy, and I'm still down -2.5, but my rooks have been forked. I guess I could take that knight with my bishop, but I didn't. Okay, that was the mistake that lost me the game. Really. You saw that. The blunder earlier put me down -2, but this mistake takes me from -2.5 to -7. I should have just taken the knight, right? But instead I did that, and then I lost the game. You would think, but I didn't lose. Did I mention that at the beginning? Well, you saw the ending position, and you saw that I wasn't in checkmate, but anyway, my opponent played some great moves. I remained down -8 or worse, -9, -10. But then, at this point, when any normal person would have resigned, I did not resign. I just kept playing because we saw in a recent video of mine why you shouldn't resign. Stockfish has found a mate in 7 here, but my opponent did not play the moves that would get them a mate in 7. I thought they were going to, but they didn't. They had a rook and a knight and a bunch of pawns left. They could have checkmated me here, but instead, they promoted to a queen, and then didn't check me with it. They checked me with the knight. Now they have mate in 1. Now, I realized this when I played here. Right after I played here, I realized that because the knight is guarding those 2 squares, that my opponent has a mate in 1, if they'll play queen to b1. They also have a mate in 2. They have a mate in 2 more than one way. But instead, they took that pawn. They still have mate in 3. There's not many things that I can do at this point. I started moving the rest of my pawns. They checked me. I went down there. They checked me. I moved over there. By the way, right here, there's also a mate because my king can't go anywhere. All they have to do is move a pawn, and then on my next turn, I basically have to play b4, and then they can promote and it's mate. Honestly, come to think of it, I can't figure out why it's not mate now, but Stockfish didn't find that. Okay, anyway, they had just moved the knight away, so I pushed the pawn because my king couldn't move. Now my king can move, so I moved it. My opponent, you can see I only have 2 legal squares to move my king, and I can't move the other pawn, but they promoted to a light squared bishop. They promoted to a dark squared bishop. My king is just moving back and forth in the 2 legal squares that it can move to. My opponent promoted to a second knight. And then, while my king continues to shuffle, they took off my extra pawn, and I thought they were just toying with me, but I realized I'm actually slightly ahead on time here. So I just started pre-moving my king back and forth, back and forth. Okay. My opponent got the bishop out of the way, promoted that pawn to a rook. They brought that rook back, put that rook on the rook's original home square. Now the other rook over there on a8 has not moved in the entire game. As my king continued to shuffle, they put a knight back on a knight's home square. They moved the other knight to its home square. Now have a 1 second increment here, so I'm back up over a minute, and my opponent is trickling down, so I just kept moving. My opponent put that knight back on its home square. They put the bishop back on its home square. They put the king back and the other bishop back. And then they put their queen back on its home square and offered me a draw. So I have no idea what my opponent's thought process was. Apparently that was fun for them. They were up 33 points of material. Stockfish says they have a mate in 3. If you were watching the eval bar, they probably had a mate in something all the way through that. For most of that time, my king was trapped on 2 squares and could only move back and forth, but my opponent was very careful not to stalemate me and to promote exactly the pieces that they needed to fulfill their quest of putting all the pieces back on the home squares. They offered me a draw, and being up 30 seconds on the clock, I accepted it. So that's the story of how that happened. But I need to focus on this part right here, just before that actually. Right here, I should have taken that pawn. I had a slight advantage, and I would have had a slight advantage had I taken here. Anything but taking back would have been a mistake for them, so they would take back, and then I would play d4. That's what it says. That's my best move. Although knight to a3 is also okay. I'm pretty hesitant to put my knight on a3, but that's what it says. I probably would have played d4, even though they have 3 pieces attacking that square, but I have 3 defenders on that square, so I guess it would have been okay. It says they probably wouldn't take it. They would probably play e6. I don't know about that. Yeah, I definitely should have taken that d-pawn because I don't think my opponent would have played e6 here. Or they might have played knight to f6. I think probably more likely they would have taken this pawn. What would have happened if they had taken the pawn? I would have taken back, right? Okay. But then they can check me, so their queen's not in the middle of this anymore. And I would block that with the knight. I probably would be tempted to block with the bishop, just because it's more forcing. And then they would put the queen back probably on the home square. That would have been their best move. Although I've had a lot of opponents that would have just put it here on b6 so they could threaten this pawn, and then I would have to move my queen up to protect that pawn, and so on. But at this point, then we would still be just about even, and I could go about my normal development. But now that their queen's on this home square, this pawn now is under attack by 2 pieces again, and I'm only defending it with 1 because of where I put my bishop. So that's probably why I should have blocked with the knight, because then I could put the bishop here, which is where I'm going to have to put it now anyway, okay? If I noticed that the pawn was under attack twice. But none of that happened because I didn't take here. I pushed d4 instead, and then after they took, I blundered by taking there. And even though they didn't play their best move here, I was behind the rest of the game. Okay. Well, they say that beginners or people at my level, at least I've heard a lot of people say that we don't actually need to study openings, that we should study tactics. But this is the reason that I began studying openings over a year ago when I started studying the Caro-Kann defense from Black's perspective, and the Nimzo Indian, in case White played d4. And when I was playing d4, I was keeping track of the different responses and what I should play, and so on. I had a long document with all the possibilities there. I didn't always remember what I should play, but it helped a lot. But this right here, to me, shows me why the study of openings is important. Because for someone who has studied the Sicilian defense, they would know that one of Black's moves here is d4, or d5. It might not be their best move. e6, it says, is their best move probably, or knight to f6. But they can play d5 here, and if they play d5, I've got to take it, or push past it, or play d3. That's what I have to know. But playing d4 was not good here, despite that saying that it's good. And if they take that, I have to know to push this pawn, or to put my knight over there. Because yeah, the problem with taking was that it left my knight and my queen hanging. Okay, I get that. All right, once again, thank you for spending your time here. And I'll see you next time.